Hi there, my name is Joe Fecht, and I'm with the Copilot team here at Ahead. Today we're going to talk about Automation Hub and specifically Environment on Demand. Environment on Demand is a strategy that we've created here at Ahead to efficiently allow your developers to create environments so that they can focus on the code rather than the back-end resources. This includes the infrastructure, the service counts, and the credentials. All that the developer needs to do is pick their runtime language, select the location that they want to deploy to. Everything will be set up on the back end. This includes all of the infrastructure, the pipelines that are tied into the runtime of their choice that automatically handles creating and packaging the image, as well as deploying it to Kubernetes in this instance. It allows them to start working on features right off the bat rather than worrying about opening tickets and working with other teams to create these resources. Additionally, it's all Active Directory integrated to help streamline the deployment as well as managing permissions. This is all completed by the developer filling out a form in ServiceNow. It's a very simple form we'll walk through in a little bit, but it just provides some basic information in order for Automation Hub to configure the pipelines appropriately. It includes code testing based on the runtime that they've selected. It again includes all the infrastructure and the pipelines associated with it, and it's also tied in with monitoring so that the solution can be managed properly. Now that we understand the idea behind environments on demand, let's do a demo to see how it actually works. Here we are in Ahead's Azure DevOps organization, and you can see we have a single project here called Ahead AH for Automation Hub. If we open that up and take a look under the pipelines, you can see that we have two pipelines listed here. One is the Create Client Azure DevOps project, and the other is the Create Client Resources pipeline. So the top pipeline creates all the components needed for the bottom pipeline in order to run. This includes a storage account that will be used to create the variable groups, as well as the key vault in order to hold the necessary secrets that the bottom pipeline will need in order to authenticate with the client's Azure DevOps organization, as well as to create the service connections within that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a demo here just to show you how this works as a whole. This pipeline only needs to be ran, the Create Client Resources pipeline only needs to be ran once. And in order to do that, I'll just kind of give you an example. If we go to the subscription here, we've got the Ahead Lab Sub 01, which is essentially the Ahead subscription. And if we go through and look at the resource groups, you can see we just have a handful of resource groups. We've got a Network Watcher resource group, a Cloud Shell resource group, as well as a Key Vault resource group. This Key Vault is used strictly within Ahead's Azure DevOps organization and Ahead's subscription. There are not any client secrets that are stored in this. This is strictly just for authentication within Ahead's environment. We also have this Client 001 resource group. This was created earlier using the Create Client Resources pipeline. It already has all the secrets populated, as well as the variable group CSV file uploaded to the storage account. When we do the demonstration within ServiceNow, this is the client that we're going to be demonstrating with. So let's go ahead and we'll create another one here. So we'll select this pipeline and we'll run it, and you can see it does have one variable defined. Since this is specific to each client, we'll go ahead and populate this client name, and we're just going to call it Demo Client 002. 02. And we'll go ahead and hit Update and go back, and we're going to run this. And we'll open up this pipeline real quick and take a look at the steps within it. And once this kicks off, you can see there's a handful of steps. One of the first ones is to go through and ensure that the client name variable is populated. If for whatever reason the pipeline is ran without that being specified, it would fail because it's required. Obviously, since we're creating something specific for the client, we need to know which client it's for. It'll also go through and manipulate the name. So if there's any spaces or anything like that, those are replaced by hyphens. And since a storage account has to be all lowercase, or the container within the storage account needs to be all lowercase, as well as not have any spaces, it will handle that as well. And then now you can see it'll actually create the resource group, the storage account, and the key vault. It will also create those secrets that are needed within the key vault, but it won't set a value. This way you won't have to worry about anything being misspelled or anything like that. It's all already established, or already there. You just need to enter the secrets. Additionally, it will set the access policy on that key vault as well. So now if we go back to the Ahead subscription, we'll refresh here, and we can see we've got that new resource group created. And if we open it up here, we can see we've got the key vault. We'll select that. We'll take a look at the secrets. And you can see all the secrets are here. However, if we look at the values for any of these, we can see the value is set to null, so there's not really any value here. These all need to be populated in order for it to work. So now we'll go back to the resource group, and there it is. And we'll go take a look at it, and then take a look at the containers, and we can see we've got our container already listed, and this is where we would upload that CSV file that would be used for the company-wide variable group, and that would contain build pipelines, minimum and maximum number of agents, and so on and so forth. Those universal that would be independent of the options that the developer would select when they were creating their environment. Now that we understand what needs to be done in order to get ready for the deployment, let's take a look at the client organization. So in this instance, we've got a client subscription, and if we take a look at the resource groups, again, we've got a Network Watcher resource group, we've got the Cloud Shell resource group, and then we've got this pre-existing resource group. If we open this up, we can see we've got our Application Insights instance, and this is leveraged for monitoring the application. We can also see we've got a key vault that's in here, and this is going to contain secrets that are needed within the environment. The key vault does not need to be unique to Environment on Demand. However, it is recommended, so this way you can apply the appropriate RBAC permissions to prevent the key vault from being inadvertently deleted or modified. This would help ensure that there's no impact to the associated pipelines for Environment on Demand, and they will continue to run successfully. With that being said, if we go look at the Azure DevOps project here, in the client, the Azure DevOps organization for the client, you can see we don't have any projects listed here. So now, since we know what we're working with, let's go back to ServiceNow. Going forward, this is how it would be presented to the developer. We are logged into ServiceNow, and we'll go ahead and go to Catalog. We'll select the appropriate catalog and select the appropriate request type. And now we've got a simple form here that we'll fill out. So we need to define a project name. Let's call this Demo Project. We'll give it a description. We need to select the host size that the environment's going to run under. For right now, let's leave it at the smallest size, again, and we can control these options. If we look at the Kubernetes version that the AKS cluster is going to run, we'll go ahead and select the 15.11. We'll give the cluster a name. So Ahead Demo Cluster, and we'll also define a namespace. And we also need to define an application name. We do have some error handling built into this. So if they, for example, since there can't be uppercase letters, if we enter one with an uppercase letter, you can see it will basically say that's not allowed. Or if we had spaces, so Ahead Demo App, it will actually go through and automatically remove those spaces and put a hyphen in its place. There is some error handling that's built into ServiceNow. So now we can go through and select the runtime stack. And again, these are very much configurable. In this example, we'll go ahead and select Node version 12. We'll also go ahead and set the region to Central US, and now we'll hit Submit. So we can see that this request has been submitted successfully. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And now if we take a look at the request here, we can see we've got a request ID, and if we give this a second, we'll go ahead and hit refresh. And now we can see that the request has been submitted to Azure. So what this means is ServiceNow has now reached out to Azure DevOps and initiated that pipeline. If we go and look at the requested item for a little more detail, you can see we have all of the variables that we selected, or all the information we filled out in the form here on the right. Additionally, we can have some comments here. And as the request processes through the pipeline, we'll see that information show up here. So now if we go over to Ahead's Azure DevOps organization, we'll go back to pipelines, and now we can see the Create Client Azure DevOps project pipeline has been started. And if we go through and take a look at this pipeline and look at the steps, what this is doing is this is creating the project in the client's Azure DevOps organization. It's setting up the pipelines within that project. It's copying over the repository, and it's also establishing all the necessary service connections so that that project can interact with the client's Azure subscription as needed. So now, with that said, we can scroll down, and you can see now it's creating the variable groups. Let's go take a look at the client's Azure DevOps organization. And we can see now we do have that project created. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. And if we look at the repositories, we can see that the application, in this case Node.js, is selected. If we go look at the pipelines, we can see we've got those pipelines established and they're already started. We take a look at all of the pipelines, you can see we've got 5 selected here. The build infrastructure pipeline is just that. This is going to create the necessary resources that are used to support the application. In this instance, we've got a Azure Key Vault to hold the necessary secrets. We've got a Azure Container Registry to hold the Docker images that have been created. And we also have Azure Kubernetes Service, or AKS, in order to run the application. We're creating all those resources with the build infrastructure pipeline. The build and push container takes the application code, runs a Docker file within it to create an image. It then uploads that image to the Azure Container Registry. And then finally, the deploy to AKS pipeline takes that image from the Azure Container Registry and then deploys it to Kubernetes, so it actually runs within the Kubernetes environment or the AKS environment. Finally, we've got 2 other pipelines on here. We've got the test code, which this goes through and performs lint testing as well as code coverage checks on the application code itself. And then we also have a pipeline to test ARM templates to ensure that they are following best practices according to the Azure Resource Manager template toolkit. If we go back to ServiceNow, we can see here that ServiceNow has been updated. As those pipelines are completing, they're going through and updating ServiceNow with their status. In this case, we can see the Azure DevOps Pipeline demo project has been successfully deployed to the client organization. And as those pipelines continue to run and complete, we'll see those messages update here. What we're going to do is we're going to pause now for a bit. We'll check back after about 20 minutes and see how everything's completed. So it took a little while longer. We probably waited about an hour and a half, but we're back here and we can see that everything looks like it updated successfully. Let's go through and take a look at the notes that Azure DevOps reported back to ServiceNow. We can see originally, the last one that we saw was the Azure DevOps project was completed successfully. Then we go back and look and we can see that the infrastructure was successfully deployed. We can also see that the application Docker image was built and then uploaded to the container registry. And then finally, we can see that that image or application was then pushed to Azure Kubernetes and is successfully hosted. And we can see it's being served on this IP address here. Perfect. Everything looks great there. If we go back and look at our request here, and this is the one we submitted, we can see that Azure DevOps went back and reported to ServiceNow that yes, this completed successfully. So it looks like everything looks good from the ServiceNow standpoint. The developer would see this and say that I know my environment is ready to go. So with that said, let's go take a look at Azure DevOps and see what it has to say. So again, we're underneath the demo project, underneath the client's Azure DevOps organization. Let's go through and take a look at the pipelines. And we can see that all pipelines have run. We do notice that the test ARM template pipeline has failed. So let's go through and take a look to see what happened there. We go through and it looks like one of the tests failed. So let's go look at the tests. Here we can see the test that failed. IDs should be derived from resource IDs. This test is checking to see that any parameters that have the word ID in them are not being passed along statically as part of the process. This is to ensure best practice in case a resource ID were to change at some point, either from being deleted or recreated, so on and so forth. However, since we're dynamically creating these IDs as part of the DevOps pipeline, it's not an issue in this scenario. Additionally, we've also submitted a pull request with the ARM template toolkit repository to get this addressed going forward. If we look at our template here, our ARM template, we can see we've got a few of these IDs listed. Again, client app ID, server app ID, tenant app ID, so on and so forth. We have these in a couple of the different templates. It's a benign issue in this scenario. However, I did want to leave this in here because I think it's a good example to see what happens when a test does fail. So going back, let's take a look at the rest of the pipelines. We can see that the build infrastructure pipeline completed. Again, this is where we create the Azure Container Registry, the Key Vault, the AKS instance. We can see this is where we create the Azure Container 3. This is the pipeline that we use to create the Container Registry, the Key Vault, as well as the AKS instance. We go through and look at the test code pipeline. Again, that ran successfully. This is where it does the lint testing and the code coverage testing. We look at the build and push pipeline, build and push container. This is where we take that image, build it, and then upload it to the container registry. And then finally, we've got the deploy to AKS pipeline, and it looks like that all completed successfully. So from an Azure DevOps standpoint, everything looks good. Again, known issue with the test ARM templates pipeline. Nothing we need to worry about right now. Hopefully that pull request will address that issue going forward. Now let's go into Azure and let's take a look. So again, we're in the client subscription here. Let's go ahead and do a refresh. And perfect. So now we can see we've got two new resource groups. We've got this one here as well as this one. And as you get more familiar with Azure Kubernetes Service, you know that anything with the MC here basically means that that is associated with the Kubernetes cluster. And if we actually take a look, we've got MC, the resource group name that matches down here. We've got the cluster name and then the region that it's deployed to. But let's take a look at this one first. So if we open this resource group, we can take a look. We can see we've got our Azure Container Registry, we've got our Key Vault, and then we've also got our Kubernetes service or AKS instance. Perfect. So it looks like everything's deployed here. Now that we've validated, we can see all the resources within the resource group. Let's go through and see if we can't connect to Kubernetes itself. So let's open up a Cloud Shell window here. And let's see if we can't get credentials to that cluster. And if we go through, and the command here is basically AZ-AKS, get credentials. We're going to give it the cluster name, the resource group it's in, and we're also going to pass this admin credential along, basically saying we want to log in as an administrator. So we'll go ahead and run that. And basically we're going to say, yep, let's go ahead and update what we have there. And perfect. So now let's do a kubectl get pods, and we're going to say the namespace of head demo namespace. And perfect. Here we can see the, again, head demo app pod that's up and running. Been running for about an hour and a half now. So let's go ahead and see if we can't see the service. So kubectl get service namespace head demo namespace. Perfect. We can see the services there. We can also see that IP address that's listed. Let's copy that and let's see what we can't find. Awesome. Who doesn't love sharks? Even better. So it looks like everything's working like it's supposed to. We've seen everything from start to finish. We've set up the core components so that the environment on demand will work going forward. We've also gone through and shown how environment on demand would work from the developer standpoint, how easy it is for them to fill out a form, select the source code that they would like, and then come back later and validate that everything's working like it's supposed to. We hope you enjoyed watching this demonstration of environment on demand, and we look forward to helping you get it set up in your organization in the near future. Thank you very much and have a great day.